5:31 PI Pacific Mornings with Aggie.
Fatala Fatu, and welcome back to Pacific Mornings with Aggie here on 5:31 PI. If you're not aware of who we are about to have a talk with, well, guess what? His newest documentary titled Patrick Gower on all the drugs, it actually screens tonight on 3. It is a continuation on his 5-year journey with drugs. He's covered medical cannabis, recreational cannabis, pee, and alcohol. What he found has made him question his own views on drug policy in Aotearoa. Now he has one final question. Should New Zealand decriminalise recreational drugs? So joining us live in the studio this morning, just to speak a little bit more on this matter, is the man himself, Patrick Gower. With that, I say talofa and welcome to the show this morning.
Oh, talofa, a big talofa to you, Aggie.
Yeah. Look, Patty, thank you so much for joining us this morning because, like I've said in the intro, you've covered the likes of pee itself, booze, cybercrime, and now it is all drugs. I mean, what's the issue with this that's been such I suppose, a topic for you that you've wanted to cover for so long?
Yeah, I think I've been on a real journey with drugs. I started off investigating cannabis, and I'll admit to your listeners, I didn't really care that much about whether cannabis was legal or illegal. It didn't really affect me. It wasn't something that I used. I had used it obviously, in my life, but I didn't have any passion about it. And while I was doing that, I saw that medical cannabis could have helped my mother, who unfortunately, like a lot of listeners, she died of cancer. And,
Wow.
people who are listening will know, that is a really, really horrible way to die. And as a loved one, you sit there thinking, what can I do to help them get through this pain? And what
Yeah.
I'd never thought of was cannabis. And as soon as I started studying it and realizing it had this amazing use, I was kind of like, yeah, this is crazy that we haven't been using this. And from there, I started to look at cannabis or weed itself and the fact that people were getting convictions for it or locked up in jail sometimes. And let's face it, it wasn't white guys like Paddy Gower getting busted by the cops for weed, right? People like me don't get busted by the cops. And there was this innate racism where it was brown people who are the ones who get done for this, and I just thought that's crazy. We've got a law here that's being used in the wrong way, and it's basically being used in a racial way. All of the figures show us that it's Māori or Pacifica that get done for weed rather than Johnny the white guy. So that made me sort of question those laws, and then of course people have seen that I've admitted subsequently that I've had a problem with alcohol. In fact, for much of my life, I've been an alcoholic. I don't drink anymore now. And
Wow.
alcohol is completely legal. We're sitting here in Manukau and we can go out and get it on every blooming corner. We go out into the neighbourhoods around here. It's terrible what we see. The way that alcohol is marketed completely legally here, even though it's got this massive harm. So all of
Yeah.
that sort of led me to think, well, why have we got the laws that we do? Because they don't make any sense to me that we're kind of locking people up for stuff they shouldn't be locked up for. Meanwhile, we've got this really harmful thing that's completely legal. In fact, we're actually shoving it down people's throats. Pretty much, that's the only thing we aren't actually doing is pouring it into people's throats, booze. And that made me
Yeah.
question these laws, which is what this documentary is all about. Have we got our drug laws right?
I mean, that's the thing though, Patty. I like, and I'm grateful that you've highlighted, the mere fact that our communities, our Māori Pacifica communities, are the one that are often at the forefront, at the brunt of, either being penalised for this. So then, really, does New Zealand need to shake up on how we actually view drug use? I mean, is it as easy as to ease our laws?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
I think that we should be in a situation where, look, if you get done for drugs, and if it's something that is not that harmful, like cannabis, or MDMA, which is obviously in really widespread use, maybe you should just get a fine and referred to some sort of service or something like that. In the case of P, which is a really, really dangerous drug, my view is, again, if you've got a small amount, you actually need help.
Right.
If you've got a big amount, okay, throw the book at them. A war on gangs, I'm happy with. But a war on actual
Mm-hmm.
drugs and drug users is no good. It hasn't worked. Just hasn't done anything. I mean, that's the other sort of side of it. Just hasn't done anything. Someone on P, even though it's a dangerous drug, we need to give them help to get off it. And we need to
Yeah.
change our attitudes to all of this stuff. and realize, hey, if someone is addicted, it's not because they're a weak person or something like that. It's because they've basically got a disease of the mind, and society has sort of inflicted either alcohol addiction on them, like me, or methamphetamine addiction, which has wrecked their brain, and we need to help them get back to normal so that they can become functioning members of society again. You're not going to do that in a prison. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, of course, look, I grew up and always the rhetoric was, drugs are bad. The majority of it is negative. So I think when we look at the effects on our communities, I mean, what are we going to try and tell the next generation? So if we're going to try and ease the laws, we already have an issue with kids vaping. Like, where do we then start stopping? And do you know what I mean, with kids who think, it's easy. Well, if we're going to allow people to smoke cannabis, well, then why can't I vape? I mean, what are your thoughts on that, though?
Yeah, and that's where it's really hard, because as a parent, the easiest thing to say to your kids is drugs are bad, cigarettes are bad, vaping is bad. Although that's an interesting one, and I want to do some work on vaping after this, because at the moment we're finding it hard to say vaping is bad, like, because we don't have the information to give the children, right? But anyway, that's a whole nother issue. But you're right. That's going to be one of the things we're going to take away under this approach. We're going to take away that big sort of sledgehammer that we have of being able to say drugs are bad, don't do them. The problem with that is, yes, that works with some kids, but it doesn't work with others. And you'll actually see in the same family, well, it worked with one of my daughters, but it didn't work with the other daughter, or it worked with one of my sons, but it didn't work with the other son. And we probably just need to get a bit more realistic about what's around these things. And it's going to be challenging. It's not, decriminalising drugs won't fix everything. It'll fix some of the things, and it'll create us other problems in other areas. But I think on balance, it's something we need to look at. But we would need to have a lot better messaging as parents of, hey, this might be, this might not be a big criminal offence anymore. You're not going to go to Remo, but hey, it's not good for you to do this stuff until you're 22 or 23 and you know what you're doing. But it's just that reality, I guess.
I think, well, Patty, while you were making the actual doco itself, because we had an interview earlier in this day where we were talking about, sometimes we can just slap easy punishment on someone, but it's having to understand why people even go down the path of drugs and alcohol and crime. When you did the doco, were you getting sort of the same patterns, the same stories as to why they even did it in the first place?
Yeah, and something about it, and I think I'm able to really, comment properly on this stuff as a journalist, because over 5 years, I've done 50 or more interviews with people involved in the drug world who are actual users, dealers, or stuff like that. Not many journalists in this country can actually say, hand on heart, that they've interviewed that many people who've been really, really affected. I've actually talked to the real people. And, it's a really good question that you've asked, Aggie, because the causes of drug abuse or crime or any of this are always way more complex than we think, and they can't just be solved by people sort of rushing out. And we're seeing all this stuff with ram raids and everything at the moment. I know it's a big deal, but policy on the hoof like this is not going to fix a lot of these complex problems. And every time you talk to someone who's involved in drug use or drug abuse, their stories are really, really complicated. They are human stories, and humans are innately complex, and it doesn't come. And I used to judge people who were addicted to drugs. I just used to look at my friends who were addicted to drugs, and friends of friends, and people's sons and daughters, and I used to just kind of like think, hey, you're pretty weak. How can you do that to your mum, or how can you do that to your wife, or how can you do that to yourself? And throughout this, my whole thing's changed. I just try not to judge anyone anymore. And I think, that's something that we have to come to. When you see someone with a problem, a lot of it's going to be their personal choice, but a lot of it is going to be society and all of these other complexities. So, long answer to say, in life, we have to be careful judging people. In life, we have to be very careful of that, Aggie.
Yeah. No, look, I'm probably pretty much 100% agree with you on that, Patty. Has there been actually maybe a bit of a pushback from certain audiences thinking that you shouldn't be covering stories like this?
Yep, I think there's going to be a pretty there will be a big pushback, and And it goes to your question earlier, which is a really good question. What do we tell our kids? There'll be people who just say, hey, look, my son took a whole lot of MDMA and ended up in hospital and something bad happened to him. And our message to them should just be no to drugs, because there's nothing good that's going to come of this stuff. And anybody who sort of has this sort of approach of making it easier to get them, or less hard or whatever, that's just the wrong thing. So I think there will be a pushback from that perspective, and I can understand that. All I'm going to say is well, we've tried that for 30 years and it hasn't worked. And that's and maybe it's time to try something else. But I do think there will be pushback, and they're good questions.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it. With as parents, what we're trying to tell our kids, would you then encourage, because I would want my son, who is at the age of 21, to be sitting down with me and us both watching this doco. What would you both want us to get out of the actual documentary?
Yeah, and I think people should watch it together, and actually, people with kids younger than that can watch it together. Because it's a responsible documentary about a problem we've got in society, which is we've got widespread drug use and abuse, and we've got laws that don't fit what's happening in reality, and we need to think about that. So you and your son can watch it. People and their grandsons or granddaughters can watch it and look at it. And all I'm asking them to do is just look at it and think, hey, what is the right approach here? Not just for me if I want to go and use it, or someone's son if they want to go and use it, or if they're confronted with it. But what about as society? How should we look at this stuff? Because it's the thing about it is, no matter what we say, it's there. It's there. It is a big part of our lives, and we need to deal with it.
I just want to quickly tackle, and roll back to, initially your first answer was around about how, our Māori Pacifica people are the ones that usually get pinned, for drug use and whatnot. Does the doco itself sort of maybe highlight anything and where we can change that, in the sense of, if you get caught, I suppose everyone gets punished, rather than it just looking like it's quite a racial thing. Is there anything that you highlight in the doco?
Yeah, I think the main thing on that is, to address that, we can either sort of leave it to the police and sort of, kind of say, hey, what you're doing, you're racially profiling, whether you want to or not, or whether it's the system or anything like that. Or we can actually just change the law so it's not there. So we know as a society that Māori and Pacifica are profiled effectively by our justice system. It targets them. It just does. This is just not even an opinion. This is just a fact. So when we have laws, particularly like around cannabis and stuff like that, where we just look at them and just go, these things are really, really skewed. Like, honestly, never in my life would Pākehā Patrick Gower ever be worried about a cop arresting me for cannabis possession. It just actually doesn't hardly even happen. But whereas out here, we know that that our Pacifica and Māori brothers and sisters, they're way more likely to get pinged. These are just facts. So we can either sort of hope that the police sort it out, and there's and education and stuff like that, or we can just take some of these laws that have been used in the wrong way out of the picture altogether. And with cannabis in particular, that is something that we could do. We could just take it out. You can't use that at all. We're just going to take that away, and that's really the one argument that I'd make for this situation of racial profiling is, it'll probably still go on because it's institutionalized, as we know, but hey, let's just take a big chunk of it right out of the game. Yeah, would be what I'd say.
Before we finish up, Patty, I want to ask, what's your take on social media, and really just because a lot of times people can just sensationalize, these stories. I love that, there is investigative journalism like what you're doing right now with this piece, because, us, the younger generation, I was going to say us generation as if I'm the younger generation.
Yeah. No, I like you saying that, because that makes me feel young. It's good. Keep it up.
Yeah. I'm wondering what it is. Do you know what I mean? How drugs can be so glorified here in Aotearoa. It's as if we have to buy into this thing, because again, I understand Māori Pacifica people are at the brunt of being pinned for it. But you know what? The honest truth is, we're also the people that are bringing it in. There is, and I think they always say it's from the lower economic society, I feel there's very much a people in higher places who are sort of saying things. Do you know what I mean? And it
Yeah.
gets fed into our community. I don't. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that. Did that come across during your
Yeah,
doco?
yeah, and one thing that really
Yeah.
worries me, if you go on TikTok in particular, there is a lot
Yeah.
of drug humor and
Mm,
viral memes about drug use on TikTok.
yeah.
And anyone
Mm,
who is a parent, knows how much time their kids spend on
yeah.
TikTok. And then you go on
Mm,
there and you see all the stuff that, makes drug use, a big joke and cool and a big
yeah.
joke. And that's where all these kind of complications kind of come in.
Mm,
And it's
mm,
worrying what people see and learn off there and how things can be sensationalized and made cool, like drug
yeah.
use.
Mm,
And gang membership and all of these kinds of things. They're kind of, you go on there and it's sort of made cool and it's made funny and gang culture and everything is kind of all sort of, and drug culture is all sort of driven as like it's a giant joke that everybody's in on. And
yeah.
if that doesn't worry you just as a New Zealander, like what is going to?
Mm,
And there's no answer, Aggie, is there, to like what do we do? Like what would be great is if we could actually smash all our phones and destroy TikTok and go back to just having the kids in front of the TV.
yeah.
And like when I grew up, that's all my mum had to do was drag me away from the TV, and she was worried what I'd learn watching American sitcoms. Like that's what she was worried about. She was worried, oh,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
watching all these American shows, and fast forward a generation, and you're like looking at them staring into their phone, and you're like, what the hell are they watching in there? So this isn't this doesn't answer your question at all, except to say that I'm bloody worried, and yeah, what do we do? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, well, look, I think if anything, the best is to know that you're worried enough to have made an actual doco on it. Do you know what I mean? And it exposes those things so that, yeah, we don't keep sweeping it under the carpet because that's often what we can do here in Aotearoa. But look, Patty, I wish we could have a little bit more time, but I appreciate just the space that you sit in again, having to do something like this. Can't wait. Of course, it will air tonight. Tuesday, December the 6th. Am I correct? That's the day that we're on, aren't we?
yeah, 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 yeah. Yep. It'll be
Yeah. So
tonight, Tuesday, December the 6th, 8:40 p.m. on 3 and 3
there we
now. If
go.
you miss it, so get around it.
Yes.
Get around it. Get around it, everyone.
Yeah. I love it. Patty, love your work and thank you so much for joining us this morning.
And I'm looking forward to becoming a semi-regular on this show now. Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, look, if you want to co-host, I'm all
Oh
for
no, I
that
don't
too.
want to co-host. I don't want to co-host. Don't promote me already. Don't promote me already. I said semi-regular.
Love it. All right, you take care. Thank you so much for being on the show
I'll
this morning.